was actually forbidden.
But after centuries of a virtual blackout on Jesus' romantic life, some modern readers find the idea of Jesus and Mary as a couple appealing. Their marriage is key to the plot of a popular novel, The Da Vinci Code. Whatever their relationship, Mary became a constant companion to Jesus as he roamed from village to village in Galilee and Judea. But she was just one small part of his loyal following. Jesus knew how to inspire his peasant audience because he was one of them. And as time went on, he gathered more and more disciples.
I think they followed him because they caught his passion. He was passionate about God, and he was passionate about the kingdom of God, which meant a way of living very, very different from the kind of life that existed under the kings and kingdoms of this world.
Jesus believed in the kingdom of God, not the Roman Empire. A provocative message. He could fly under the radar of Roman authority as long as he remained in Galilee and Judea. But one day, around 30 AD, Jesus and his following head to Jerusalem, the mightiest city in the Holy Land. And it's a decision that will seal his fate. The Jewish High Holy Days are approaching, and like so many other Jews, Jesus is drawn away from Galilee to Jerusalem and its sacred temple.
The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem.
I don't think Jesus left Galilee because he felt like his work was done there. I think he goes to Jerusalem because Jerusalem is the place of God's presence, it's the place of the temple.
Jerusalem looms large in biblical times. Each spring, at Passover, hundreds of thousands of Jews make a pilgrimage to the temple. Here, the city's Jewish leaders, as well as Rome's, are policing the scene. Caiaphas has been high priest of the temple since 18 AD. He's a wealthy aristocrat, and at the time, the most powerful Jew in the world. But there's one man even more powerful than Caiaphas, Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea since 27 AD.
The Gospels portray Pontius Pilate as a rather weak and wavering character, but Josephus, the Jewish historian, portrays him as a ruthless and cruel and very decisive person. When he worried about a crowd, he would send in and amongst them people with clubs, and he would beat people to death. This is a harsh person who wasn't afraid to use force to keep the peace.
Pilate usually lives outside Jerusalem in Caesarea Maritima, the Roman capital of Judea. But Passover commemorates the Jews' escape from slavery in Egypt. So he's on the scene to remind everyone who's in charge: Rome.
Passover was a potential for all kinds of problems for the Romans because masses of people were coming. These people included all kinds of rabble-rousers, as well as people who just wanted to come to perform their religious rituals.
Pilate and Caiaphas need to keep the peace in order to keep their jobs. But Jesus enters the holy city armed with his radical philosophy, and a collision may now be inevitable.
When Jesus walks into Jerusalem at the Passover with Pilate in charge and starts talking about the kingdom of God, that's confrontational. Maybe more than that, it's suicidal.
A stream of pilgrims pours up the temple steps to worship, but not for free. They have to pay tax in order to use it. Most buy a lamb to offer as a sacrifice. Money changers are conveniently stationed to collect the fees.
I think it's quite possible that this is the first time that Jesus has ever been to the temple, and he's shocked by what he sees. It's the first time he really has to confront the issue of how religion and power are brought together at the temple.
Jesus shouts at the merchants and money changers.
My house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers.
When most people think of the temple, they think of a quiet place of prayer and of worship, a serene place. But this is the kind of scene that you have to imagine Jesus causing a riot as he comes in, kicks over the tables, kicks over the doves, sends sheep and lambs scattering.
The riot is over in an instant. The most violent act Jesus apparently ever commits. Over the years, Christians come to call it the cleansing of the temple. But the flare-up undoubtedly attracts the attention of the authorities. And experts suspect that Jesus was fully aware of how much danger he was putting himself in.
I think it was pretty clear to Jesus that he was likely to be killed. I don't think you could be doing what Jesus was doing and not be aware that what you were doing could very easily get you in fatal difficulty with the authorities.
Even the Gospel of Mark writes these fateful words.
And when the chief priests and the scribes heard it, they kept looking for a way to kill him.
Is the riot in the temple the incident that sends Jesus to the cross? The temple stands at the heart of Judaism, and Jesus strikes against the vested interests who run it. For head priest Caiaphas and Roman governor Pontius Pilate, this is exactly the kind of trouble they were trying to avoid. Not to mention that Pilate probably sees Jesus as a political threat.
I think that the Romans were convinced that Jesus wanted to foment a violent revolution. When they heard people calling him King of the Jews, when they heard him talking about the kingdom of heaven, they were going to get rid of this guy.
So why isn't Jesus arrested on the spot? Outbursts in the temple were usually dealt with quickly and brutally.
Anytime you have people living under occupied rule and you have lots of them congregating together, that automatically raises the possibility for trouble to break out. Jesus coming in and causing trouble among these large crowds, there's your volatility.
They wanted to arrest him, but they feared the crowd.
Jesus' popularity allows him to stay and preach for a few days. But by the time he leaves, his days are numbered. One of his very own followers will turn out to be no follower at all. As the sun sets over Jerusalem around 30 AD, Jesus and his disciples gather for a meal. Jesus takes a piece of bread, breaks it, and says these simple words.
Take, this is my body.
Then he passes a cup of wine.
Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood.
Blessing the wine and bread is part of a ceremonial Jewish meal. But on this evening, Jesus adds words that transform this Jewish ritual.
This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood.
Today, the link between wine and blood is based simply on color. But to a first-century Jew, the symbolism would have been much more powerful.
It becomes